Hello, and welcome to the second part of my mother's memorial. Back or a couple of weeks ago, on February 7th of 2025, my mother, Bachrani Lek Chatanan, passed away from cancer. I wanted to put this episode to answer more of the questions that I was getting about what happened and what was the timeline like, how did this go on, and I'm going to do my best to respond to most of it. Obviously, I don't know all the answers. I'm not a doctor. So everything here is going to be kind of with a grain of salt. But back in September of 2024, my mother was diagnosed with a tumor of about 2 inches, a little over 5 centimeters, in her right lung. And we were all curious, I guess you could say, if it was cancerous, if it was actually a tumor at all. And it was one of those things where we kind of just wondered where it came from. A 2 inch or a 5 centimeter mass doesn't just appear overnight, right? And the doctors were slightly confused. They're all trying to figure out what was going on. The thing is that mom had tuberculosis as a child. And because of that, she has lung scarring. And it also is a requirement here to have chest x-rays done practically every year. So mom would go in for her lung x-rays on pretty much a yearly basis. So for something all of a sudden to show up that was 5 centimeters long, it's somewhat strange, right? And so mom was concerned, but, she thought it could have been a wrong reading. It could have been the scarring, which makes it harder to read those x-rays. And she needed to get in for kind of like a CT scan, and for maybe if there was a lump there, for them to actually to biopsy it. So she got scheduled for multiple biopsies, multiple scans, and we kind of went to the hospital quite a bit at that time. Luckily, I was living with my mom, so I could just, whenever her appointment was, I could just take her to it. That way, if there was any discomfort or inability to drive, I could take care of her. And so the thing is that we kept going, and all the tests would keep coming back negative. It's not cancerous, not cancerous, not cancerous. And at this time, we really didn't understand what they were biopsying. I think that's the problem. Because I don't know if they actually biopsied the mass in my mom's lung. Moreover, they biopsied all these polyps that were along her esophagus. Because that's what they were, quote unquote, concerned about. And it then finally got to a point where they were like, okay, well, everything looks like it's not cancerous, but having a 2 inch or, a 5 centimeter mass in your lung isn't great. So we'll go ahead and remove it. And so they scheduled out the surgery, and the surgery was in November. Now, all these biopsies and everything were happening during the early part of October. Because there was everything came back negative, the doctors told my mom that when she planned a trip out to Switzerland to go ahead and take it, that everything was going to be fine. She was looking okay, right? And really the only doctor that was somewhat concerned was her lung doctor, the pulmonologist. She's like, really come back and try to get it done as soon as possible. And ironically, although the pulmonologist was like, this needs to be done as quickly as possible, the surgeons they weren't available. So the earliest date that we could get was kind of later in November. And so Mom went to Switzerland, had a great time. She came back and was ready and raring to go for her surgery, the lump removal. And when that fateful day came, the doctors went in, and I would figure, again, this is conjecture, I have no idea. I would figure that they'd have enough scans and biopsies and have been able to do everything enough to know what they're going into. So you have to understand my surprise when I went to go pick up Mom or go see her, visit her on the day after. And the doctors told me they didn't remove the lump, but they did biopsy it. And they said there was complications. The mass was larger than they thought it was. It was also up against her esophagus and part of the bronchial split, to where if they made a mistake in the removal of the cancer, there's a chance that it would have killed her. Now, I don't know. I've been trying to avoid names this whole time, calling doctors and hospitals, obviously, but I don't know how to get beyond this at this point. Because here's something that my mom very stubbornly did that had me concerned. We were at Kaiser HMO for all these procedures. And true enough, the service there was horrendous. Mom was with Kaiser for over 40 years, and she really stayed true to them because she loved her family doctor, her internal medicine doctor, whatever they're called, the doctor that you'd always go see, your normal doctor. And all else be damned, she loved him so much that she was going to trust everything that they did. This surgery was the first time that trust was broken. She didn't know who to believe anymore, and she didn't know if they actually knew what they were doing anymore. And that was somewhat problematic. Because the thing is that right after the surgery, Mom felt that the nurses really treated her poorly, to the point where she literally called me and was like, Charlie, I need your help. You need to come to the hospital. Mind you, the hospital is like 30, 40 minutes from this house, which I was living at. And she was losing feeling in her fingers because the wrist, the band that they put on your wrist was literally cutting off her circulation. And although she kept calling for a nurse, they didn't come. And I'm going to take that with a grain of salt because I understand we're understaffed here. But I will also say that the nurse that came told her that she was busy and that she had other people that she had to tend to. I mean, what the hell's the point of having a nurse call button if they're going to tell you that they're not going to come or they're going to come on their own time? Like that's just stupid beyond me. And I accepted it because I wanted my mom to get the best of care and understand that the medical industry is understaffed right now. But mom gave no fucks. She's like, if this is how they're going to treat me, what did mom call it? She said, Kaiser is just a butcher house and they're here to try to kill me. And that is her opinion. And I stood by it. I said, that's fine, Mom. What do you want to do? Because we still need to get you better. And her thought process from then on was just fuck Kaiser. And she immediately at that point started looking into how to get out of Kaiser and into another service. She started looking and doing her research, and the research that she did was heavily pushed her towards Anthem Blue Shield Blue Cross. I still don't think they're the best, but that's again my opinion. But mom was on Medicaid, and she understood that it was her only option really at this point to get out and go to another hospital. During this time, swapping over everything, it was a real harsh process for us, particularly because mom has always had Kaiser, like I said. And so the last thing that we kind of went through with Kaiser was the biopsy came back and it was positive for cancer. Mom was one of 3% of Asian women in the world that will get lung cancer, although they've never smoked, they've never done any drugs, they've never done anything with their lungs. And she was very shocked. We all were very shocked from that news. And what happened was they then told her that she needed to heal in order to go into chemotherapy. That was the next step. And because it was done later in November, the earliest we could get the chemo done was in the middle of December, really. And so what ended up happening was that mom would then come home and heal, and we would change her bandages, get whatever she needed, any meds. And mom would do her research. And so mom finally found out that she wanted to go with an oncologist. That was Epicare. That was the hospital, as they called it, but I believe it really was John Muir. And that her regular doctor would be here at Stanford, right down the street from this house. She started talking with them a lot, started moving all her documents over, trying to get everything needed over to the care team that was going to be taking over. But unfortunately, because she wasn't under that insurance yet, they couldn't do anything, or they didn't want to do anything. I don't care how you look at it. They just weren't willing to move. They weren't willing to get things preset in order for my mom to come in and just kind of get the things started running. They had to start from a stop. And we went and did the first round of chemo at Kaiser in December, on the 20th, I believe. And everything was kind of looking good until this is when mom started getting pneumonia quite frequently. And she would have to go to the hospital, to the ER, to the ICU to get treated. A few days after her chemo, she actually had to get her lung drained because there was a buildup of liquid in there. And it was quite painful for her. I'm talking about Kaiser still because we dropped them in December and we couldn't pick up Anthem Blue Cross until January. After all this treatment, Mom was at the Kaiser ER, and they drained her lung. They were treating her for pneumonia, giving her high antibiotics. And when January 1st came around, we swapped over immediately over to Epicare and started going into their process, which unfortunately just took some time to ramp up. About 2 weeks in, we were able to get the first round of immunotherapy. The last thing that Kaiser wrote was that they believed that Mom was at stage 4 of her cancer process and that it has spread. But luckily, there was an immunotherapy that was highly successful against the cancer that spread. And so at the beginning of this video, I said that Mom's cancer was in the upper lobe of her lung. And I believe there's 3 lobes in your lung. The second lump that they found was actually between Mom's second and third lobe. And when they tested it, they found out that it was, I believe, it was missing a protein that made this immunotherapy very, very highly successful against it. All that paperwork went to John Muir, and the John Muir doctors looked at it. And they looked at it, and they're like, okay, well, we could assign the immunotherapy as Kaiser suggested, and immediately gave it. It took about a week for them to get the medicine to my mom, and my mom started taking it. The problem here is that they just took it on Kaiser's word. And I was only somewhat worried because we left Kaiser because we didn't trust them. So John Muir trusting them maybe was not the best idea. And that doctor agreed, so he started going over all my mom's scans and all her paperwork, and he ordered a ton more scans, CT, an MRI, the PT or PET scan, and x-rays. And after studying all the previous items as well as all the new sheets, he took my mom off the immunotherapy. He said that's not pertinent to what we're doing currently. Between the 2 cancers in your chest, the one between your second and third lobe is not that important. The one that's more life-threatening right now is the upper mass, and it's growing. And so he put in for a new chemotherapy for my mom to go into, because at this time he noticed that my mom was getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and that she wasn't going to be able to survive if they did the IV chemo. The only problem is as time passed, because everything takes time, Mom was getting weaker, weaker, and weaker. She was having more troubles breathing. She had difficulties eating. She was losing weight massively. And I don't think it was the weight loss that comes with appetite loss from the chemo or any of the medicines. It was because it hurt to swallow. The cancer was growing so large in her upper lobe that it was actually pressing up against her esophagus, and when the food went down, her esophagus would press up against the food, and that injured her, and that actually hurt her. A few days after my birthday, Mom had to go back to the ICU. The pain was so intense that she wanted to see if they could drain her lung again, because she says it's the same pain. What we found out was the cancer was so large at that point that it was actually pressing up against the nerves. And she said it wasn't in the front, it was in the back. But the crazy thing is that that's just kind of how your nerves work. The pain could be somewhat phantom. You don't know what's actually pressing up where and where the pain actually is. And when they looked to try to drain it, they found out that the mass has grown a lot larger. We were still waiting for the medicine at this point. And mom went to the ER. She was kept in the ER for a few days before getting transferred into a normal hospital room. While she was at the normal hospital room, her new her new chemo drugs came in, and they started giving it to mom. During this time, they found out that she was aspirating, which is why she kept getting pneumonia. Meaning, instead of the food and drink going down into her stomach, the cancer was pressing over so much on her esophagus and on I forget what it's called, the split of where your lungs are. So as the air goes down, there's a split between there, a Y intersection, if you want to call it, so that the air could go into both of your lungs. And because mom was aspirating, what it meant was the cancer was pressing so hard up against that esophagus and that split, that instead of the food going down into the right part, down your throat into your stomach, it was actually getting caught into the air pipe and would go into her lungs, which would then cause her to get pneumonia. She was trying really hard. She was fighting real hard at this time. And it was a real tough time because mom was constantly in pain. She couldn't eat anything. And it took a while before they decided to put her on a feeding tube. And as they started getting all these things, we all saw mom deteriorating. But there was always these glimpses of hope. Mom would come back and she'd be stronger than ever, be talking, chatting it up. And then the next day, it's like she used up all her energy. When we got the medicine, I asked mom, how hard do we want to fight this? When should we give up? And mom says, as long as she's breathing, to keep fighting. And so on February 1st, we were told that mom wasn't breathing enough to activate a machine that they put on you to help you breathe. Mom's breathing was getting worse and worse. The cancer was taking its toll. They noticed that mom was breathing through her stomach rather than through her chest, because the body was just doing everything it could in order to get oxygen. And she was struggling so hard that they asked us, do we want to intubate her? Which is where they stick a tube down your throat so that they could press and push air in to your lungs. They said that there was a slight chance that it might kill her. And I said, mom wants to fight this cancer as hard as possible, even if it meant that we had to force her to breathe, as long as her heart was still beating. And I just realized now I might have made a mistake in saying it. I said as long as she was still breathing, she wanted to be helped. No, as long as her heart was still beating, she wanted to be helped, even if it meant intubating her, which is what we ended up doing. And throughout that week, mom would get stronger, and then mom would get weaker. And then on February 7th, in the morning, I was actually at a job interview. I got a call from the hospital saying that I needed to come in immediately, that things have turned for the worse. And I cut my interview short, packed up all my stuff, and went to the hospital. Started making phone calls like a madman. Luckily, My aunt from LA was just up here to talk to mom. We called all mom's friends, mom's neighbors, my friends, and the local temple that mom was a part of, her temple group that she was with, that she would see every Monday, that we would colloquially call the Monday group. Everybody came, they all prayed with her, and later that evening, mom's kidneys gave out, and she quietly and gently passed away. I have to say that I'm truly grateful for all the doctors that cared for her, even if they were wrong. I do believe that we did everything we could to try to have her survive. Mom was very tired. She was in a lot of pain. I'm glad that she was able to go gently and without pain. There is one note that I will say. The doctor from John Muir, the oncologist, because we actually had both of the oncologists from Stanford and from John Muir looking at mom to give her the best treatment possible. He made a funny statement that he doesn't understand why chemo wasn't treated immediately to my mother back in September when they found this tumor. He said that he believes it would have been a much different story had they done that. But what was more wild to him was that he was looking back at x-rays and documents, and he believes mom had this cancer for the past 3 years. Now, in the interview video that I did previously, the first part of this 3-part series, you'll notice mom was coughing. And I tried to cut most of it out, but that video was done about 3 years ago. And it's interesting that we noticed it and were worried for mom at that time. I believe we were in Germany when we really noticed mom started coughing a lot. And we kept asking, hey, what's going on? Why are you coughing like that? That's not normal. And mom kept saying that she went to Kaiser every year and that she got her chest x-ray, that we didn't have to worry about it. But I do take away, it's a hard field. There's no blame, but it does suck that I was missed for so long. And that's only if this doctor was right, because he was the only one that mentioned it. The oncologist over at Stanford didn't mention it. So I do take it with a grain of salt. But as I ended in the first part of this series, I do miss her. My mother was an amazing person, and as much as she would piss me off or upset me, she was still my mom. I believe that's really the entire story of this, in my opinion, just short journey. The doctor said she had 6 months to 3 years. We always thought it would be closer to 3 years. Not 5 months later, but because of that, yeah, I miss her dearly, and there is one more part of the series, and so I will just go ahead and end this here and say see you in the next part. Thanks for watching.